Welcome to my channel, a list that brings your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
The rain hammered against the windows of my small cafe like an impatient customer. It was nearly closing time, and the day had dragged on with fewer patrons than usual thanks to the downpour. I wiped down the counter for the third time, my fingers raw from the sanitizer and hot water. My cafe, Sweet Remedy, was my pride and joy, all 600 square feet of it, tucked away on a side street in Boston's North End. Not exactly prime real estate, but it was mine. Every cracked tile and chipped mug. "Looks like it's just you and me tonight," I said to the empty room, my voice echoing slightly against the exposed brick wall. The antique clock above the espresso machine ticked past 8:45 p.m. 15 minutes until official closing time. Though I doubted anyone would brave this storm for a cappuccino, I turned to organize the pastry case for tomorrow. What remained of today's offerings would go to the shelter down the street when the bell above the door jingled. A gust of rain-soaked wind swirled in, carrying with it an elderly man who looked thoroughly drenched. Water dripped from his gray wool coat, forming a puddle at his feet. "I'm so sorry to come in so late," he said, his accent thick with old country Italian. "I got caught in this terrible rain. Don't worry about it," I replied, already reaching for a clean towel. "You're welcome to wait it out here. Can I get you something warm to drink?" He smiled gratefully, revealing deep creases around his eyes. "An espresso would be wonderful, if it's not too much trouble." As I prepared his drink, I noticed 2 large shopping bags at his feet, soaking wet and looking ready to tear at any moment. Designer bags from the high-end boutiques on Newbury Street, definitely out of place in my humble establishment. "Here you go," I said, sliding the espresso across the counter. "On the house." "Bad weather discount," he chuckled, a warm, grandfatherly sound. "You are very kind, Miss Sophia." "Sophia Carter," I answered, wiping my hands on my apron. "Ah, Sophia. A beautiful name." He nodded approvingly. "I am Vincenzo." Just Vincenzo, no last name offered. I didn't press. When he'd finished his espresso, the rain continued its assault outside. Vincenzo glanced at his watch with a frown. "I'm afraid I must go. My driver is waiting, and I have kept him too long already." He struggled slightly as he tried to gather his bags, his arthritic hands trembling with the effort. Without hesitation, I came around the counter. "Let me help you with those. I can walk you to your car," I offered, already taking the heavier of the bags. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly." "I insist," I said firmly. "Besides, it's almost closing time anyway." I flipped the sign to closed, grabbed my raincoat from the hook, and together we ventured into the downpour. I held an umbrella over us both as best I could, though the wind made it nearly useless. The bags were unexpectedly heavy, and I wondered what treasures this old man had purchased that required such strength to carry. A sleek black Mercedes idled at the curb about half a block away. As we approached, I noticed the darkly tinted windows and the imposing figure of a man standing beside the car, seemingly unbothered by the rain soaking through his suit. "That's my ride," Vincenzo said, a note of relief in his voice. The suited man rushed forward at the sight of us, his face a mask of concern. "Mr. Rossi, I was about to come looking for you." Mr. Rossi. So there was a last name after all. "Relax, Antonio. This kind young lady was good enough to help an old man with his burdens." Vincenzo patted my arm affectionately. "This is Sophia. She has a lovely little cafe just there." Antonio barely acknowledged me, instead taking the bags from my hands with surprising gentleness. "You should have called, sir. You shouldn't be carrying anything in this weather." "Sometimes fate puts the right people in our path at the right moment," Vincenzo replied cryptically, his eyes lingering on me. "Thank you, Sophia Carter. Your kindness will not be forgotten." There was something in the way he said it, like a promise rather than pleasantry, that sent a small shiver down my spine. Before I could respond, Antonio had ushered him into the back seat, closed the door firmly, and the Mercedes pulled away from the curb, leaving me alone in the rain. I stood there for a moment, water seeping into my shoes, watching the red taillights disappear around the corner. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the previous night's storm had been a figment of my imagination. I arrived at Sweet Remedy at 5:30 a.m. as usual, unlocking the door and flicking on the lights. The familiar scent of coffee beans and lingering sweetness from yesterday's pastries greeted me like an old friend. By 6:15, I had the first batch of muffins in the oven and was preparing the coffee stations for the morning rush. If you could call a dozen or so regular customers a rush. Marco, my only employee, wouldn't arrive until 7, leaving me these peaceful moments to myself. At precisely 7:30, when Marco was arranging fresh pastries in the display case, and I was serving our first customers of the day, the bell above the door chimed. 4 men entered in perfect unison, like dancers in a well-rehearsed performance. My blood turned to ice water. They were dressed identically in immaculate black suits, white shirts, and thin black ties. Each wore dark sunglasses despite being indoors, and each had the unmistakable bulge of a shoulder holster beneath their jackets. They moved with military precision, positioning themselves around the café, one by the door, one near the register, 2 others taking up positions near the windows. The few customers inside froze, coffee cups suspended halfway to their lips. Marco dropped a croissant, the delicate pastry shattering on the floor like my sense of security. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" I managed to ask, my voice embarrassingly thin. The one nearest the register stepped forward. He removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Miss Carter," he said, "not a question, but a confirmation. We need you to come with us." My heart pounded so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. "I'm sorry, but I'm working. I can't just leave." "Your employee can handle things," he replied, glancing dismissively at Marco, who looked ready to faint. "Our employer insists." "Your employer?" I repeated stupidly. "Mr. Rossi would like to speak with you." He said it as if this explained everything, as if being summoned by a stranger was the most natural thing in the world. "Mr. Rossi. The old man from last night. What could he possibly want with me?" "I don't understand," I said, gripping the counter for support. "If Mr. Rossi wants to thank me for helping him, he can come here for a free coffee." A ghost of a smile flitted across the man's face. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "That's not how this works, Miss Carter. Mr. Rossi doesn't come to you. You go to him." A woman in the corner stood abruptly, grabbed her purse, and hurried out the door, giving the guard stationed there a wide berth. Her departure seemed to break a spell, and 2 other customers followed suit, leaving their half-finished drinks behind. Only Mrs. Abernathy, my most loyal customer at 82 years old, remained. Her rheumy eyes narrowed suspiciously at the intruders. "Young man," she called out, her voice surprisingly strong, "you tell your boss that kidnapping is still a federal offense, fancy suits or not." The man didn't even look at her. His eyes remained fixed on me, waiting for my answer. "I'm not going anywhere with you," I said, summoning what courage I could. "Please leave my cafe now," he sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Miss Carter, perhaps I wasn't clear. This isn't a request." "Actually, it sounded exactly like a request, and I'm declining," I shot back, my fear giving way to indignation. "Now please leave before I call the police." At this, all 4 men exchanged glances. The one who had been speaking reached into his jacket pocket. I flinched, expecting a weapon, and pulled out a business card. He placed it on the counter. "Mr. Rossi will be very disappointed," he said evenly. "When you change your mind, call this number." "I won't be changing my mind." Another almost smile. "We'll see. Mr. Rossi is a very persuasive man." With that, they filed out of the cafe as precisely as they had entered, leaving behind a vacuum of tension so profound my ears popped. Marco sagged against the pastry case. "Holy shit, Sophia. Who were those guys? What did you do?" "I helped an old man with his shopping bags," I muttered, picking up the business card. It was heavy stock, cream-colored, with just a phone number embossed in elegant script. No name, no company. Mrs. Abernathy hobbled over to the counter, her cane tapping against the tile floor. "Sophia, dear, you've got yourself mixed up with Vincenzo Rossi." The name clearly meant something to her. "You know him?" She nodded gravely. "Everyone in the North End who's been here long enough knows the Rossi family. They've controlled this part of Boston for generations." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "They say his son, Alessandro, runs things now, But Vincenzo still holds the real power. My stomach dropped. What exactly do they run? She gave me a look that said I should know better than to ask. Everything, dear. Protection, gambling, imports, the family business. The Mafia. I had helped a Mafia boss with his shopping bags. And now, for some unfathomable reason, he wanted to see me. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety. Every time the bell above the door chimed, I jumped. By closing time, my nerves were frayed beyond repair, and I'd broken 3 mugs with my trembling hands. Marco had offered to stay late with me, but I sent him home. Whatever trouble I was in, I didn't want to drag him into it. I was wiping down tables when the bell chimed one last time. My head snapped up, expecting to see the 4 suited men returning. Instead, a single figure stood in the doorway. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a charcoal gray suit that looked like it cost more than 3 months of my rent. Dark hair, cut short and neat, framed a face that belonged on a Renaissance sculpture. All sharp angles and perfect proportions. But it was his eyes that held me captive. Amber, almost golden in the cafe's warm lighting, and utterly, terrifyingly cold. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to reverberate through my chest. "We need to talk." I knew, without being told, exactly who he was. The son. Alessandro Rossi. "We're closed," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped inside anyway, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a prison gate locking. "I think you'll make an exception." He moved toward me with the fluid grace of a predator, each step measured and deliberate. Unlike his father's bodyguards, he wore no visible weapon, but he didn't need one. Everything about him radiated danger. "My father speaks very highly of you," he said, stopping at the counter that separated us. "Thank God for that barrier, flimsy as it was. He says you showed him kindness when others would have turned him away." I swallowed hard. It was nothing. Just common decency. Common? His mouth curved into something too sharp to be called a smile. "No, Miss Carter. Decency is anything but common in my experience." His gaze traveled around my cafe, taking in the mismatched furniture, the local artwork on the walls, the chalkboard menu with its carefully lettered specials. I felt exposed, as if he were examining not just my business, but the very essence of who I was. "Why am I here, Mr. Rossi?" he asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. I don't know what you mean. In this neighborhood, with this cafe." His eyes returned to mine, pinning me in place. "The North End isn't what it used to be. Rents have skyrocketed. Small businesses are being pushed out every day. Yet here you are, holding on. I'm curious how." The implication was clear, and it ignited a spark of anger in my chest. "If you're suggesting I've done something illegal to keep my cafe afloat, you're wrong. I work 18-hour days. I live in a studio apartment the size of a closet. I haven't taken a day off in 3 years." My voice grew stronger with each word. "Every penny I make goes back into this place. So that's how I'm here, Mr. Rossi. Through hard work and sacrifice." For a long moment, he just looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, he inclined his head slightly, as if in respect. "My father was right about you," he murmured, almost to himself. Then louder, "You refused my men this morning. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I did. I don't respond well to intimidation." Another almost smile flickered across his face. "So I see. A quality I would typically admire, if it weren't so inconvenient." He reached into his jacket, and I tensed. But he merely withdrew an envelope, which he placed on the counter between us. "My father is hosting a dinner tomorrow night. He requests your presence as his guest of honor." I stared at the envelope as if it might bite. "And if I decline?" Alessandro's eyes hardened. "That would be unwise. My father is not accustomed to refusal." "Is that a threat, Mr. Rossi?" "No, Miss Carter. Merely an observation." He adjusted his cuffs, a gesture so casual it seemed out of place in our tense exchange. "A car will pick you up at 7. Wear something nice." With that, he turned and walked toward the door. Just before exiting, he paused, glancing back at me over his shoulder. Oh, and Sophia, don't make me come looking for you. You wouldn't like what would happen if I had to do that. The door closed behind him, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. My legs gave way, and I sank onto the nearest chair, the envelope clutched in my trembling hand. What had I gotten myself into by simply helping an old man with his bags? I tore open the envelope. Inside was an elegantly embossed invitation to a dinner at an address in Beacon Hill, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Boston. And beneath it, a handwritten note in shaky script to the kind angel who came to an old man's aid. Your presence would honor me greatly. Vincenzo. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning in my tiny apartment above the cafe. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Alessandro Rossi's cold amber gaze, felt the subtle menace in his parting words. Don't make me come looking for you. By morning, I had convinced myself to go to the dinner, not out of fear, though there was plenty of that, but out of a desperate need to understand why a Mafia family had suddenly taken an interest in me. Knowledge was power, and right now, I had none. The day crawled by in agonizing slow motion. I told Marco I had a family dinner that evening, earning a skeptical look but no questions. After closing the cafe early at 5 p.m., I stood before my pathetic excuse for a closet, staring at clothes that were wholly inadequate for whatever awaited me. The nicest thing I owned was a simple black dress I'd worn to a college friend's wedding 2 years ago. It would have to do. I paired it with my only heels, and a delicate silver necklace that had belonged to my mother. My hair, usually confined to a practical bun for work, fell in dark waves past my shoulders. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, vulnerable, uncertain, but determined. At precisely 7:00 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside my building. The driver, a stone-faced man in his 50s, opened the door without a word. As we drove through the city, the neighborhoods grew progressively more affluent, until we finally pulled up to a towering brownstone in Beacon Hill. Gas lamps flickered on either side of an imposing oak door, giving the entrance an almost Gothic appearance. Before I could gather my courage to exit the car, the driver was opening my door, extending a hand to help me out. "Miss Carter," he said, the first words he'd spoken to me, "Mr. Rossi is expecting you." The door of the brownstone opened as we approached, revealing a butler in formal attire who bowed slightly at my arrival. "Welcome to the Rossi residence, Miss Carter. Please follow me." The interior was a testament to old-world opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors and antique furniture that belonged in a museum. Oil paintings in gilded frames lined the walls, landscapes, portraits, all exuding wealth and history. The butler led me through a maze of hallways until we reached a pair of double doors. "Miss Sophia Carter," he announced, swinging the doors open. The dining room beyond was intimate, despite its grandeur, with a table set for just 6 people. Vincenzo Rossi sat at the head, looking much more composed than when I'd met him, his silver hair neatly combed, his suit impeccable. Alessandro stood by a fireplace that crackled with real flames, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. 3 other men, all in similar dark suits, occupied the remaining space. Every eye turned to me as I entered, and I fought the urge to flee. "Ah, Sophia!" Vincenzo's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "You came. I'm delighted." He rose with surprising agility for his age and crossed to take my hands in his. "Thank you for honoring an old man's invitation." "I didn't feel I had much choice," I said quietly, my eyes flicking to Alessandro, who watched our interaction with inscrutable intensity. Vincenzo followed my gaze and chuckled. "My son can be persuasive, a necessary quality in our line of work." He patted my hand. "But tonight is not about business. Tonight is about gratitude and new friendships." He led me to the table, seating me at his right hand, a position of honor, I realized belatedly. Alessandro took the seat directly across from me, his eyes never leaving my face. "Allow me to introduce my associates," Vincenzo said. "This is Marco Venucci, my consigliere." A man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses nodded to me. Unlike the others, his eyes were kind behind his spectacles. "Franco and Paolo Gambino, my nephews." 2 younger men, perhaps in their 30s, gave identical tight-lipped smiles. There was a family resemblance between them. The same hooded eyes, the same slightly crooked noses that had likely been broken and reset. And of course, my son, Alessandro, whom you've already met. Alessandro raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement, his expression unreadable. The dinner began with a parade of exquisite Italian dishes, each more delicious than the last. Despite my anxiety, I found myself eating with unexpected appetite. Vincenzo kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling stories of the old neighborhood, of Italy, of his childhood. It was easy to forget, listening to him, exactly who these men were and what they did, until Alessandro spoke. "Tell us about yourself, Miss Carter," he said, cutting into the tender veal on his plate with surgical precision. "What brought you to the North End?" All eyes turned to me, and I took a sip of wine to steady myself. "My mother was Italian," I said. "Her parents owned a bakery in the North End before it was gentrified. I used to visit as a child. When I decided to open my own place, it felt like coming home." "And your father?" Alessandro pressed. "American. He was a professor at Boston College. He died when I was 12. "I'm sorry for your loss," Vincenzo said, and the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. "Family is everything." Alessandro's gaze hadn't wavered. "And you have no other family?" "No," I admitted. "It's just me." Something flickered in his eyes. Satisfaction? Relief? It was gone before I could identify it. "That must be difficult," the consigliere Marco commented. "Running a business alone with no support." I straightened in my chair. "I manage." "Barely," Alessandro said. "Your cafe is charming, but financially precarious. Your landlord has raised your rent 3 times in the past 2 years. Your equipment is outdated. And the new chain coffee shop opening 2 blocks away will likely cut your business in half." I froze, my fork suspended midway to my mouth. "How could you possibly know all that?" He smiled, a cold, calculating expression that never reached his eyes. "Information is a commodity in which my family trades extensively." "My son," Vincenzo interrupted, shooting Alessandro a warning look, "sometimes forgets his manners, but he raises valid concerns. Your situation is not ideal." "I never said it was," I replied, setting down my fork. "But it's mine. I built it from nothing, and I'll keep fighting for it." Vincenzo nodded approvingly, spoken like a true Italian, despite your American name. "You have fire in your blood, Sophia." "Why am I here, Mr. Rossi?" I asked bluntly. "Why this dinner? The bodyguards at my cafe, all of it, because I helped you with your bags? That's hardly worthy of whatever this is." The table fell silent. The Gambino brothers exchanged uneasy glances. Even Alessandro seemed surprised by my directness, but Vincenzo merely laughed, a hearty sound that filled the room. "Direct. I appreciate that." His expression sobered. "You're here because you showed kindness to a stranger without expectation of reward. Do you know how rare that is in this world? In my world especially." He leaned forward, his dark eyes suddenly intense. "I've spent my life surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, power, protection. Even my own family." He glanced at his son. "They serve me out of duty and blood obligation. But you, a young woman with nothing to gain, helped an old man simply because he needed help." "Anyone would have done the same," I insisted. "No," Alessandro said flatly. "They wouldn't. Trust me on this." Vincenzo reached for my hand, patting it gently. "I want to help you, Sophia, as you helped me." Warning bells rang in my head. "I appreciate the gesture, Mr. Rossi, but I don't need help. Your financial records suggest otherwise," Alessandro commented dryly. I flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You looked at my financial records? That's illegal." He shrugged, unconcerned. "Many things I do are illegal. It's a matter of perspective. What my son is trying to say," Vincenzo cut in smoothly, "is that we have the resources to ensure your cafe thrives. The landlord could be persuaded to lower your rent. The chain coffee shop might decide this neighborhood isn't profitable after all. Equipment can be upgraded." I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you offering me protection, like some kind of business arrangement?" Alessandro supplied. "Nothing more, nothing less." "And what would you expect in return?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Vincenzo spread his hands. "Nothing. Consider it a gift." I didn't believe him for a second. No one, especially not a man like Vincenzo Rossi, gave something for nothing. I can't accept, I said firmly. Thank you for the dinner, but I should go. I made to stand, but Alessandro's voice stopped me. My father is dying, Miss Carter. The words landed like a physical blow. I sank back into my chair, looking at Vincenzo with new eyes. Now that Alessandro had said it, I could see the signs, the slight yellowish tinge to Vincenzo's skin, the way his suit hung too loosely on his frame, the tiredness behind his smile. Pancreatic cancer, Vincenzo confirmed calmly. 4 months. Maybe less, the doctors say. He waved a hand dismissively. I've lived a long life. I'm not afraid of what comes next. I'm sorry, I said, the words wholly inadequate. But I still don't understand what this has to do with me. Vincenzo exchanged a look with Alessandro that contained volumes of unspoken communication. Then he turned back to me. In my final months, I find myself reflecting on my legacy. I've built an empire, yes, but at what cost? What mark will I truly leave on this world? He gestured around the table. These men will protect the family's interests. Alessandro will lead with strength and intelligence. But who will remember the man, not the myth? Who will speak of kindness when they tell stories of Vincenzo Rossi? I felt a creeping unease, a sense that I was being drawn into something much larger and more complex than a simple dinner. Mr. Rossi, let me help your cafe, he interrupted gently. Let me do this one good thing, freely given. Let me leave behind this small piece of redemption. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I looked at Alessandro, whose expression had softened almost imperceptibly as he watched his father. You don't even know me, I said to Vincenzo. I know enough, he replied. I've lived long enough to recognize a good soul when I see one. The room fell silent again, all eyes on me as I grappled with the impossible decision before me. Accept help from a Mafia don, becoming entangled with his family and their world, or refuse and potentially watch my cafe, my dream, wither and die. Before I could answer, Vincenzo winced suddenly, pressing a hand to his side. Alessandro was on his feet instantly, at his father's side. That's enough for tonight, he said firmly, helping Vincenzo to stand. You need your rest. Vincenzo waved him off, though he allowed his son to support him. Think about my offer, Sophia. That's all I ask. As if on cue, the butler appeared to escort Vincenzo from the room. The old man paused at the doorway, looking back at me with eyes that held a lifetime of secrets. Whether you accept or not, you will always have a friend in Vincenzo Rossi, he said solemnly. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with Alessandro and the others in a silence thick with unasked questions and unspoken fears. After Vincenzo's departure, the atmosphere in the dining room shifted. The Gambino brothers muttered excuses and followed their uncle out, while Marco the consigliere lingered only long enough to give Alessandro a meaningful look before he too left. Within moments, I found myself alone with Alessandro Rossi, the most dangerous man I'd ever met. He moved to the sideboard, pouring 2 glasses of dark liquor. Grappa, he said, offering one to me. My father imports it from a small distillery in Bassano. You won't find it anywhere else in Boston. I accepted the glass but didn't drink. Does he really have cancer? Alessandro's jaw tightened. Yes. And there's nothing that can be done with all your family's resources? I chose the word carefully. A bitter smile twisted his lips. Money can buy many things, Miss Carter. Time, unfortunately, isn't one of them. He took a long drink. We've consulted specialists across the world. The cancer was discovered too late. It's aggressive. For the first time since I'd met him, Alessandro Rossi looked vulnerable. The revelation was startling, like seeing a crack in marble. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Whatever Vincenzo was, whatever crimes he'd committed, he was still a father. And Alessandro, for all his cold calculation, was still a son, facing the imminent loss of his parent. He likes you, Alessandro said abruptly. I haven't seen him take to someone so quickly in years. I only helped him with his bags. It wasn't what you did. It was how you did it. He studied me over the rim of his glass. Without fear, without expectation, people in our world don't experience much genuine kindness. Your world, I corrected. Not mine. And yet, here you are. His eyes caught mine, holding them. In my dining room, drinking my grappa. I set the untouched glass down with a decisive click. A situation I intend to remedy immediately. I'd like to go home now, Mr. Rossi. Instead of answering, he crossed to the windows that overlook the garden, his back to me. Do you know what will happen to your cafe without our intervention? I'll manage, I repeated stubbornly. No, he said simply. You won't. Your landlord isn't just raising the rent randomly. The entire block is being prepared for redevelopment, luxury condominiums, boutique retailers. Your lease won't be renewed when it expires in 3 months. The news hit me like a physical blow. That's not possible. My landlord promised. Your landlord lied. Alessandro turned to face me. The papers were signed last week. I've seen them. My mind raced. 3 months. All my work, my savings, my dreams, gone in 3 months. Even if that's true, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I don't see how getting involved with your family could possibly be the solution. What would people think if they knew I was associated with you? They would think you were under our protection. He spoke the word like a caress. And they would treat you accordingly. As what? Your charity case? Your pet project? I spat the words. His eyes darkened. As someone under the care of the Rossi family, it would open doors for you, not close them. At what cost? I challenged. People don't cross the Mafia without consequences. I've seen enough movies to know that. Alessandro's laugh was unexpected, a deep sound that transformed his face. Movies exaggerate. We're businessmen, Sophia, admittedly with unorthodox methods, but businessmen nonetheless. Who kill people, I added. His amusement vanished. When necessary. A chill ran through me at the casual admission. This man had almost certainly taken lives, ordered deaths, ruined families. And here I was, alone with him, challenging him. As if reading my thoughts, his expression softened marginally. You're afraid of me. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. Good. Fear is a natural response to a predator. It keeps prey alive. He set his empty glass down. But you're not prey, Sophia. Not to me. What am I, then? The question hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us fully understood. Alessandro studied me for a long moment, his amber eyes reflecting the firelight. I don't know yet, he finally admitted. But I intend to find out. Before I could respond, the door opened, and the driver who had brought me appeared. The car is ready, sir. Alessandro nodded. Take Miss Carter home. Just like that, I was dismissed. But as I moved toward the door, his voice stopped me one last time. My father's offer stands. Think about it, Sophia. 3 months isn't a long time. I spent a sleepless night turning the Rossi's offer over in my mind. By morning, I'd made my decision. I would not get entangled with a crime family, no matter the cost. If I lost the cafe, I would start again somewhere else. My integrity was worth more than brick and mortar. The morning rush at Sweet Remedy was busier than usual, perhaps because people were curious about the suited men who had appeared the day before. Mrs. Abernathy came in for her regular Earl Grey tea and scone, settling at her usual table by the window. You look tired, dear, she observed as I brought her order. Trouble sleeping? I hesitated, then sat across from her. Mrs. Abernathy, how well do you know the Rossi family? Her eyes widened slightly. Well enough to stay out of their way. She leaned forward. Did they bother you again? Not exactly, I hedged. I had dinner with them last night, with Vincenzo and his son. She nearly choked on her tea. Good Lord, child. What did they want? To help me, supposedly. Vincenzo offered to intervene with my landlord, make sure the cafe stays open. And what did you tell them? Nothing yet. But I'm going to decline. Mrs. Abernathy's weathered hand covered mine. Listen to me, Sophia. I've lived in this neighborhood for 60 years. I've seen what happens to people who get involved with the Rossis, even peripherally. It never ends well. So you think I'm making the right choice? She hesitated, her eyes troubled. I think, once the Rossis take an interest in you, saying no becomes complicated. A cold knot formed in my stomach. What do you mean? They're not accustomed to refusal, and they don't give up easily on what they want. She squeezed my hand. Be careful, dear. Very careful. Her warning stayed with me throughout the morning. By noon, my nerves were so frayed that when the bell above the door chimed, I nearly dropped the mug I was filling. It wasn't Alessandro or his men who entered, however, but a courier with a large bouquet of white lilies. Delivery for Sophia Carter, he announced. The flowers were exquisite, their perfume filling the small cafe. Attached was a small envelope containing a card with elegant handwriting. For your thoughtful consideration of my offer. Vincenzo Rossi. Secret admirer? Marco teased, eyeing the extravagant arrangement. Something like that, I murmured, tucking the card into my pocket. An hour later, another courier arrived with a thick manila envelope. Inside was a detailed financial analysis of Sweet Remedy, projections for the next year with and without the proposed improvements, and architectural renderings of what my cafe could look like with renovations. The level of detail was staggering and deeply unsettling. They must have been planning this for days, not hours. By closing time, I was emotionally exhausted and no closer to peace with my decision. I sent Marco home early and was just locking up when a black Mercedes pulled to the curb outside. My heart stuttered as Alessandro Rossi emerged, as immaculate as ever in a charcoal suit. He entered without waiting for an invitation, his presence immediately dominating the small space. "Did you receive my father's gifts?" he asked without preamble. "The flowers, yes. And the proposal." I crossed my arms defensively. "It's very thorough. We don't do things by half measures." He moved through the cafe with the same predatory grace I'd observed before, examining everything with critical eyes. "This place has potential. It's not for sale," I said sharply. "Everything's for sale, Sophia. It's just a matter of finding the right price." He ran a finger along the counter, checking for dust. For some, it's money. For others, security. For a few, passion. The way he said the word sent an unwelcome shiver down my spine. "What does your father want from me, really?" I asked. "And don't tell me it's nothing. No one does something for nothing, especially not men like you." Alessandro turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "My father is a complicated man. He's lived a life of moral compromise. Now, facing his mortality, he seeks a different legacy, and I'm supposed to be part of that legacy? I don't even know him. But he sees something in you." Alessandro took a step closer. Something worth preserving. The intensity of his gaze made me retreat until my back hit the counter. "And what about you? What do you see in me?" The question surprised us both. I hadn't meant to ask it, certainly not so directly, but now it hung between us, charged with unexpected tension. Alessandro moved closer still, until barely a foot separated us. "I see a woman too stubborn for her own good," he said softly. "Beautiful, yes. Brave, certainly. But ultimately naive about the world and how it works." "I'm not naive," I protested. "I just have principles." "Principles are a luxury, Sophia." His voice was almost gentle, one that few can truly afford. "Is that why you have none?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Instead of anger, his response was a slow, appreciative smile. "There it is again. That fire." He raised a hand, and for one heart-stopping moment I thought he might touch my face. But he merely reached past me to pick up the business card he'd left yesterday, still lying on the counter. "Have you made your decision?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "Yes. I'm grateful for your father's offer, but I must decline. I'll find another way to save my cafe." Alessandro studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "As you wish." The easy acceptance caught me off guard. "That's it? No threats? No warnings about making a mistake? Would they change your mind?" "No." "Then why waste my breath?" He tucked the card into my apron pocket. "Keep this, in case you reconsider." He turned to leave, and against my better judgment, I called after him. "What happens now?" Alessandro paused at the door. "Now? You continue your life, and we continue ours. Just like that? Your father accepts my refusal?" My father respects courage, even when it inconveniences him. His eyes held mine. 3 months, Sophia. When your lease expires and you have nowhere to go, call the number. With that, he was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive cologne and a heavy sense of foreboding. What Alessandro didn't know was that I had already decided to fight. If my landlord was planning to redevelop, I would find out exactly what permits had been filed, what zoning changes approved. Boston had laws protecting small businesses. I had rights. And I had no intention of calling that number, no matter what happened. Or so I told myself as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to my apartment, trying to ignore the nagging voice that whispered I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. 1 week passed, then 2. I threw myself into researching tenant rights, attending community board meetings, even consulting with a pro bono lawyer about my options. The news wasn't good. The development plans had been in motion for over a year, carefully navigated through city bureaucracy with expensive lawyers and strategic donations to key officials' campaigns. My lease wouldn't be renewed, that much was certain. I explored relocating, but the numbers didn't add up. Commercial rents throughout Boston had skyrocketed, and the cost of moving my equipment and establishing a new customer base would deplete what little savings I had. Each night, I fell into bed exhausted, my dreams haunted by visions of my cafe's closing day. Through it all, there was no sign of Alessandro or his father. No more flowers, no more suited men, no sleek black cars idling outside. It was as if our strange interlude had never happened, except for the business card I couldn't bring myself to throw away, tucked into my wallet behind my driver's license. Mrs. Abernathy continued her daily visits, her concerned gaze following me as I moved with increasing desperation through my familiar routines. "You look terrible, dear," she observed one rainy Wednesday afternoon, when the cafe sat empty save for her. "Thanks," I said dryly, dropping into the chair across from her. "That's exactly what every woman wants to hear." "You know what I mean." She stirred her tea with deliberate precision. "Have you heard anything more from them?" "Not a word." She nodded slowly. "Interesting." "What's interesting about it? They made an offer. I declined. End of story. The Rossis don't typically accept rejection so easily." She sipped her tea. "Especially Alessandro." Something in her tone caught my attention. "You sound like you know him personally." A shadow crossed her face. "This neighborhood has a long memory, Sophia. The Rossis have been here for generations. I remember Alessandro as a boy, quiet, watchful, always at his father's side. Even then, there was something intense about him." "He's certainly intense now," I muttered. Mrs. Abernathy's gaze sharpened. "Be careful, dear. Men like Alessandro Rossi don't pursue things casually. If he's let you alone for now, it's because he's waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you to come to him." She set down her cup with a decisive click. "And from the looks of you, he won't have to wait much longer." Her words stung, because they contained a kernel of truth. With each passing day, with each dead end in my search for solutions, the Rossi's offer loomed larger in my mind. What harm would there really be in accepting their help? It wasn't as if they were asking me to participate in anything illegal, just to accept their protection, their patronage, their ownership. A voice in my head whispered. The bell above the door jingled, interrupting my thoughts. A young man in an expensive suit entered, his eyes scanning the cafe until they found me. "Miss Carter?" he asked, approaching with a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. "Yes?" I answered warily. "Jonathan Pierce, from Beacon Development Group." He extended a hand, which I didn't take. His smile faltered slightly, but he pressed on. "I was hoping we might have a moment to discuss your cafe. Beacon Development Group, the company buying the building." Mrs. Abernathy gathered her things with surprising speed. "I should be going. Call me later, Sophia." She shot the developer a withering glance as she hobbled past. Once we were alone, Pierce laid his portfolio on the table and extracted a glossy brochure. "We're very excited about our plans for this block," he began, his voice slipping into a practiced pitch. "The North End is experiencing a renaissance, and our luxury mixed-use development will be at the heart of it." "Fascinating," I said flatly. "What does this have to do with me?" He smiled, all perfect teeth and no warmth. We understand the importance of maintaining the neighborhood's character. Sweet Remedy has become something of a local institution, albeit a small one. I waited, saying nothing. We'd like to offer you space in the new development, he continued. A retail location on the ground floor, with preferential lease terms for the first year. Hope flared briefly. What kind of terms? 20% below market rate for 12 months, after which you transition to standard commercial rates. He slid a document toward me. Of course, there would be a 20-month gap between your current lease ending and the new space becoming available. The hope died as quickly as it had come. So, you're offering me the chance to close my business for almost 2 years, somehow stay afloat without income, and then reopen in a space that would eventually cost triple what I'm paying now? His smile didn't falter. We're offering you an opportunity many small business owners would jump at, Miss Carter. Most aren't invited back at all. How generous, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. And what am I supposed to do for those 20 months? Pierce shrugged, the gesture dismissive. That's not really our concern, though I understand there's a charming little business incubator space opening in Dorchester. Perhaps you could operate at a reduced capacity there. I stood abruptly. Thank you for your offer, Mr. Pierce. I'll give it all the consideration it deserves. He gathered his materials, unfazed by my obvious dismissal. The offer stands for 2 weeks, Miss Carter. After that, we'll be moving forward with another tenant for the retail space. At the door, he paused. Oh, and if you're thinking of fighting this legally, I wouldn't waste your time or money. The development has all necessary approvals. After he left, I locked the door behind him, flipping the sign to closed, despite it being only 3 p.m. Tears of frustration burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I channeled my anger into scrubbing every surface in the cafe until my hands were raw and my arms ached. It was nearly dark when I finally stopped, sinking onto a chair in exhaustion. The silence of the empty cafe pressed in around me, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock and the occasional car passing outside. Almost without conscious thought, my hand moved to my pocket, extracting my wallet and the business card hidden within. The heavy cream cardstock felt substantial between my fingers, the embossed number catching the light. Before I could talk myself out of it, I pulled out my phone and dialed. The call was answered on the second ring. Miss Carter, Alessandro's voice, smooth and unsurprised. I've been expecting your call. Of course he had. He'd known exactly how this would play out. Anger flared again, but I swallowed it down. Mr. Rossi, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I'd like to discuss your father's offer. I assumed as much. I could hear the satisfaction in his tone. Had a visit from Beacon Development, did you? My grip tightened on the phone. You knew. I know everything that happens in this neighborhood, Sophia. There was a brief pause. My car will pick you up in 20 minutes. We'll discuss terms over dinner. I can meet you at a restaurant, I countered, unwilling to surrender complete control. That wasn't a suggestion. His voice hardened slightly. 20 minutes. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, equal parts furious and terrified. This was exactly what I'd feared. The moment I reached out to them, my choices began to disappear. But what alternative did I have? 20 minutes later, the now familiar black Mercedes pulled up outside. The same driver held the door, his face impassive, as I slid into the back seat. This time, we drove not to Beacon Hill, but deeper into the North End, to a small, unassuming restaurant tucked away on a narrow side street. No sign marked its presence, just a red door and a small brass plaque reading, Famiglia. Family. The driver led me inside, where a host immediately straightened to attention. Miss Carter, he said, as if he'd been expecting me. Mr. Rossi is waiting. I was led through the dimly lit dining room, past tables occupied by serious-looking men in expensive suits, many of whom nodded respectfully as I passed. The restaurant had the feeling of a private club, one with very exclusive membership. Alessandro sat alone at a corner table, a glass of red wine before him. He rose as I approached, the gesture oddly formal. Sophia, he said, my name like silk on his tongue. You look lovely. I glanced down at my work clothes, jeans, a simple blouse, my hair hastily pulled back, and raised an eyebrow. I came directly from the cafe. You didn't exactly give me time to change. I wasn't being facetious, he replied, holding my chair. Please sit. A waiter appeared instantly with a glass of wine for me and disappeared just as quickly. Alessandro studied me over the rim of his glass. "You've had a difficult few weeks," he observed. "You would know, since you've undoubtedly been having me watched." His lips quirked. "Not constantly. We do have other business to attend to." "Lucky me, indeed." He set down his glass. "Beacon Development made you their standard offer, I presume? Substandard space at inflated rent? After an impossibly long wait?" I nodded, taking a sip of wine to hide my discomfort. "It was excellent, of course. Did you know," Alessandro continued, "that Beacon is a subsidiary of Crown Investments, which in turn is owned by Meridian Holdings? Should that mean something to me? Probably not. But it might interest you to know that Meridian's CEO's brother owes my family a considerable sum. A gambling debt accumulated at one of our establishments in Atlantic City." I set down my glass carefully. "Are you saying you could stop the development?" "No. The development will proceed. It's too far advanced. Too many interests involved." His amber eyes held mine. "But certain accommodations could be made." "What kind of accommodations?" Alessandro signaled to the waiter, who returned with 2 menus. "Let's order first." "The chef here makes a carbonara that would bring tears to your eyes." I ignored the menu. "I'm not hungry, Mr. Rossi. I'm here to discuss business." He sighed, setting aside his own menu. "Very well. Direct as always." He leaned forward, hands clasped before him. "Here's what I propose. We purchase the building that houses your cafe." I blinked in surprise. "The entire building?" "It's a sound investment. The development will increase property values throughout the neighborhood. We allow you to remain in your current space, with a 99-year lease at your current rate, adjusted only for inflation." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it almost certainly was. "And what would you want in return?" "2 things." Alessandro held up a finger. "First, 20% of your cafe's profits." I started to protest, but he raised a hand to stop me. "Not now. When it becomes profitable. After we help you upgrade your equipment, expand your menu, and establish a proper online presence. Until then, we're simply investors, patient ones." It was still steep, but not unreasonable from a pure business perspective. "And the second thing?" Alessandro's eyes darkened. "Your time." My breath caught. "What does that mean exactly?" "My father enjoys your company. His time is limited, and his pleasures few. You would join him for dinner once a week. Accompany him to the occasional social event. Nothing inappropriate, nothing dangerous. Simply be there. Like a paid companion," I said flatly. "Like a friend," he corrected, his voice surprisingly gentle. "He has few of those, real ones at least." I studied him, trying to discern any hidden agenda in his expression, but his face remained frustratingly unreadable. "And that's all? No other expectations? That's all?" Alessandro reached into his jacket and withdrew a slim document. "It's all outlined here. You're welcome to have a lawyer review it, though I assure you it's straightforward." I took the document, my fingers brushing his. "Why is this so important to your father?" "To you?" Something flickered in Alessandro's eyes. An emotion I couldn't identify. "My father told you. He sees in you a chance for a different kind of legacy. And you?" Alessandro was silent for a long moment. "I want my father's final months to be peaceful," he said finally. "If your presence provides him comfort, then securing it becomes my priority." There was more to it than that. I could feel it. But I doubted he would reveal anything further tonight. "I'll need time to think about it," I said, tucking the document into my bag. "Of course. Take all the time you need." His smile was knowing. "You have 3 days. 3 days? That's hardly—" "3 days," he repeated firmly. "After that, certain opportunities will no longer be available." The threat was veiled but unmistakable. I stood, suddenly eager to be away from him, from this place with its atmosphere of quiet menace. "Have the driver take you home?" Alessandro said, remaining seated. "And Sophia? Sleep well. Dreams often bring clarity." As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on me, watching, calculating. I had 3 days to decide whether to bind my future to the Rossi family, but in my heart, I already knew what my answer would be. The next morning, I called in Marco to manage the cafe and took the contract to a lawyer, not the pro bono one I'd been consulting, but an expensive corporate attorney whose office overlooked Boston Harbor. I had to dip into my emergency fund to cover the consultation fee, but if I was considering a deal with the Rossi family, I needed real legal advice. The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Eleanor Walsh, read through the document twice before setting it down and removing her glasses. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Does it matter?" "It might." She tapped the contract with a manicured fingernail. "This is not standard language. It's exceptionally favorable to you in many respects. The rental terms alone are practically unheard of in commercial real estate." "Is it legitimate?" "Legally binding?" "Absolutely. Assuming, of course, that the other party honors their commitments." She gave me a searching look. "Miss Carter, I don't know who you're dealing with, but contracts this one-sided usually come with invisible clauses." I shifted uncomfortably. "Meaning?" "Meaning obligations not spelled out on paper, expectations that exist outside the legal framework." She leaned forward. "Is there anything you want to tell me about who's offering this deal?" I hesitated. "Let's just say it's someone with significant influence in the North End." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "I see." She pushed the contract back toward me. "In that case, my advice is to walk away. Whatever they're offering isn't worth the entanglement." "That's not really an option," I said quietly. She studied me for a moment, then sighed. "Then negotiate." "This section here," she pointed to the profit-sharing clause, "should include a cap, 20% of profits, not to exceed a specific dollar amount annually. And this companion arrangement with the elderly gentleman, it needs boundaries. Specific days, times, duration." I nodded, making notes. "And most importantly," she continued, "add an exit clause. Some condition under which you can terminate the agreement without penalty. They'll never agree to that. They might, if the condition is narrow enough. Something unlikely, but not impossible." She thought for a moment. "Perhaps if you relocate outside of Massachusetts? Or if the property is taken by eminent domain." It was thin protection, but better than nothing. I thanked her for her time and left with a list of proposed changes, unsure if I'd even have the courage to suggest them. That evening I closed the cafe early and walked through the North End, trying to clear my head. My feet carried me almost unconsciously to St. Leonard's Church, where I slipped inside and sat in a back pew. I wasn't particularly religious, but the quiet sanctuary offered a peace I desperately needed. "Seeking divine guidance?" a familiar voice asked. I startled, turning to find Alessandro Rossi sliding into the pew beside me. He was dressed more casually than I'd ever seen him, in dark jeans and a simple black sweater, though the watch on his wrist probably cost more than my annual rent. "Are you following me?" I demanded, keeping my voice low in the sacred space. "Coincidence," he replied. "I come here sometimes, to think." The idea of Alessandro Rossi in a church, seeking solace or reflection, seemed incongruous with everything I knew about him. "I didn't take you for the religious type." "I'm Italian," he said, as if that explained everything. "The church is in our blood, even for sinners like me." We sat in silence for a moment, the flickering votive candles casting dancing shadows on the ornate walls. "Have you decided?" he asked finally. "I have concerns, questions." I expected nothing less. There was a hint of approval in his voice. "You saw a lawyer." It wasn't a question. "You had me followed. Protected," he corrected. "There are people who would be very interested to know you're associating with my family." The implication sent a chill through me. "Other criminal organizations, you mean?" "Among others." He shifted to face me more directly. "What did your lawyer advise?" "To walk away." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Sensible advice. She also suggested some changes to the contract, if I don't walk away, which you won't." Again, not a question. I met his gaze squarely. "I want a cap on the profit sharing. 20%, not to exceed $50,000 annually." To my surprise, he nodded. "Reasonable." Emboldened, I continued. I also want the companion arrangement clearly defined. 1 dinner per week, no more than 3 hours. Social events limited to 2 per month, with at least 3 days' notice. Alessandro's eyes narrowed slightly. My father's health is unpredictable. There may be times when he wishes to see you outside the schedule. Then he can call and ask, like a normal person. I'll accommodate him when I can, but I need boundaries. He studied me for a long moment, then inclined his head slightly. Agreed. Anything else? An exit clause, I said, bracing for resistance. If I move out of state, or if the property is taken by eminent domain, the agreement terminates without penalty. Alessandro was silent, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Those are my conditions, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Take them or leave them. I accept your first 2 conditions, he said finally. The exit clause is problematic. It's non-negotiable. His eyes hardened. Everything is negotiable, Sophia. The question is what you're willing to trade. What do you want? I asked warily. A modification. The agreement terminates if you leave the state. Yes, but only after my father's passing. While he lives, you remain bound by our arrangement, regardless of your location. It made sense, in a twisted way. This was about Vincenzo, after all. Once he was gone, Alessandro would have no reason to maintain the charade of friendship with me. Agreed, I said, suddenly exhausted by the negotiation. I assume you'll have a revised contract drawn up? It will be delivered tomorrow. Alessandro stood, hesitating for a moment before adding, My father would like to see you, tonight, if possible. I looked up at him in surprise. Now? It's after 9. He doesn't sleep much these days. The pain keeps him awake. The simple statement, delivered without self-pity or manipulation, reminded me of what lay at the heart of this strange arrangement. A dying man seeking comfort in his final months. All right, I said softly. I'll see him. The Beacon Hill brownstone was quieter than during my previous visit. Only one security guard stood at the entrance, nodding respectfully as Alessandro led me inside. The butler was nowhere to be seen, and the grand house had a subdued, almost sleepy atmosphere. My father is in his study, Alessandro explained, guiding me down a hallway lined with oil paintings. He tires easily, so please keep your visit brief. He stopped before a heavy wooden door, his hand on the knob. Sophia, he said, his voice low. Whatever your feelings about me, about our family, my father genuinely values your company. Please remember that. Before I could respond, he opened the door, ushering me into a warm, book-lined room. Vincenzo Rossi sat in a leather armchair by a crackling fire, a plaid blanket across his lap despite the warmth. In the 2 weeks since I'd last seen him, he seemed to have aged years. His face was more gaunt, his complexion waxier. Sophia! His face lit up at the sight of me, bringing a flash of vitality back to his features. What a wonderful surprise. Alessandro didn't tell me you were coming. Alessandro lingered in the doorway. I'll leave you two to talk. Vincenzo waved him away impatiently. Yes. Go intimidate someone else for a while. Once we were alone, Vincenzo gestured to the chair opposite his. Please sit. Would you like some tea? Or perhaps something stronger? Nothing, thank you, I said, taking the offered seat. Up close, the signs of his illness were even more apparent, the slight tremor in his hands, the hollowness around his eyes. I understand you and my son have been negotiating, he said, his dark eyes twinkling with surprising mischief. He's not used to being challenged. He seems to be handling it well enough. Alessandro adapts. It's what makes him an effective leader. Vincenzo adjusted his blanket. But that's not why I wanted to see you. How's your cafe? Thriving, I hope? The casual inquiry felt surreal, as if we were old friends catching up rather than a dying mafia boss and a cafe owner being coerced into an arrangement. It's the same as when you visited, I answered. Struggling but surviving. Not for long, though. Without intervention. It wasn't a question. You've decided to accept our help? I nodded slowly. With some conditions. As you should. Never enter any arrangement without protecting yourself. He leaned forward slightly, wincing with the effort. Alessandro told you what we want in return? 20% of profits. And time with you. Vincenzo's smile was gentle. Does that seem so terrible? Spending time with an old man? It's not that, it's... I hesitated, unsure how to express my reservations without causing offense. The family business, he supplied. You worry about being tainted by association. Yes. He nodded thoughtfully. A legitimate concern, but let me ask you this, Sophia. Does helping an old man in the rain make you complicit in his sins? Does accepting help from someone you disapprove of compromise your own integrity? That depends on what's being asked in return. And I ask only for your company, your conversation. Perhaps, if I'm fortunate, your friendship. He spread his hands. Is that so corrupting? Put that way, it seemed almost reasonable. Almost. Why me? I asked, the question that had been nagging at me since that rainy night. Of all the people you could befriend, why choose a struggling cafe owner you met by chance? Vincenzo was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. I told you before that kindness is rare in my world. What I didn't say is how much I miss it. He looked up, his eyes suddenly vulnerable. My wife, Eliana, was kind. Not weak, never that. But genuinely, intrinsically kind. She saw the good in people, even me. What happened to her? Cancer. Like the one that's now claiming me. Ironic, isn't it? His smile was sad. When you helped me that night, something in your manner reminded me of her. The way you didn't hesitate, didn't calculate the advantage or risk. You simply helped because it was right. His revelation hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just about a criminal seeking redemption. It was about a widower, facing his own mortality, finding a connection to someone he'd loved and lost. I'm sorry about your wife, I said softly. And I'm sorry about your illness. Don't be sorry. Be my friend, for whatever time I have left. He reached across the space between us, his hand trembling slightly. Not because of contracts or obligations, but because every life needs moments of simple human kindness. I took his hand, surprised by the strength still present in his grip. I think I can do that. 6 months later, I stood at Vincenzo Rossi's grave, a bouquet of white lilies in my hands. The funeral had been elaborate, a testament to his standing in both the criminal and legitimate business worlds. Politicians, police officials, and known underworld figures had all paid their respects. A strange assembly of the powerful united in their connection to one man. Alessandro stood a few yards away, accepting condolences with stoic dignity. He had emerged from the church immediately after the service, nodded once in my direction, and taken his position by the grave. We hadn't spoken directly. Over the past months, I had fulfilled my obligation to Vincenzo, joining him for dinner each week, accompanying him to the occasional concert or gallery opening when his health permitted. To my surprise, I had genuinely come to enjoy his company. Despite his criminal enterprises, he was a man of culture, wit, and unexpected wisdom. He spoke rarely of his business, instead sharing stories of his childhood in Italy, his love for his late wife, his complicated relationship with his only son. In turn, I told him about my dreams for the cafe, my struggles as a small business owner, even my fears about becoming entangled with his family. He listened with genuine interest, offering advice that was surprisingly practical and ethical. As for the cafe, the Rossi family had been true to their word. The building was purchased within days of our agreement, my equipment upgraded the following week. A discreet sign in the window, under the protection of the Rossi family, was all it took to send the developers from Beacon scurrying away. Business improved dramatically, though whether from the renovations or from people's curiosity about my connection to the notorious family, I couldn't say. Alessandro kept his distance, appearing only occasionally to escort me to or from his father's home. Our interactions remained formal, businesslike, though I sometimes caught him watching me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Now, as the other mourners gradually dispersed, leaving only Alessandro and me at the graveside, I approached slowly, placing the lilies atop the casket. He went peacefully, Alessandro said, breaking the silence between us, in his sleep, as he wished. I'm glad, I replied softly. He deserved an easy passing, did he? Alessandro's voice held no judgment, only genuine curiosity. After the life he led, I considered the question seriously. I think, at the end, we all deserve mercy. He studied me for a long moment, then gestured toward the cemetery gates where his car waited. May I give you a ride home? The request surprised me. In the months since our arrangement began, he had never been alone with me, except in transit to or from his father's home. Thank you, but I can take a cab. I insist, he said, and there was something in his tone. Not quite a command, but not quite a request either. We have matters to discuss. The drive back to the north end passed in silence. Alessandro stared out the window, his profile sharp against the fading light. Only when we pulled up outside my cafe did he finally turn to me. Our contract is now void, he said abruptly. With my father's passing, your obligation ends. A strange mix of relief and something like disappointment washed over me. I understand. The property remains yours to use, under the terms we agreed upon. The protection of the Rossi family continues. He hesitated, then added, but you are free to leave Boston should you wish. I don't, I said honestly. This is my home. My business is here. Alessandro nodded, as if confirming something to himself. In that case, I have a proposition for you. Another contract? I couldn't keep the wariness from my voice. No, something different. For the first time since I'd known him, Alessandro Rossi looked uncertain. My father valued your company, your perspective. I find that I do as well. I stared at him, not comprehending. What are you saying? I'm saying that I would like to continue our association. Not as a business arrangement, but as... He searched for the right word. Friends. Friends? I repeated, the word sounding strange in the context of our relationship. To start, he said, his amber eyes intent on mine. Perhaps in time something more, if you were amenable. The suggestion left me speechless. Alessandro Rossi, the feared Mafia boss, was asking me, what? To date him? The idea was absurd, dangerous, completely out of the question. And yet, there had been moments over the past months, a glance held too long, a brush of hands when helping me from a car, a rare smile that transformed his severe features, that had made me wonder what might exist beneath the cold, calculated exterior he presented to the world. Alessandro, I began carefully, your world and mine are very different. They've overlapped for 6 months without disaster, he pointed out. And you've changed me, Sophia, just as you changed my father. I haven't changed anything. You've reminded me that there are people who act from genuine goodness. People who see value in things beyond power and control. His voice softened. My father saw it immediately. It took me longer. I shook my head, confused by the turn our conversation had taken. What exactly are you proposing? Dinner, he said simply. Tomorrow night. Not as part of any obligation or agreement. Just dinner. Between two people getting to know each other better. And if I say no, then I will respect your decision. He held my gaze steadily. I told you once that everything is negotiable. I meant it. But this isn't a negotiation, Sophia. It's an invitation. I should have refused. Everything I knew about Alessandro Rossi, about his family, about the world he inhabited, told me to walk away now that I had the chance. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability I'd never seen before, a hope that seemed at odds with the calculating man I thought I knew. One dinner, I said finally. No promises beyond that. The smile that spread across his face was genuine, transforming his features in a way that made my heart skip a beat. One dinner, he agreed. For now. As he walked me to my door, his hand came to rest lightly at the small of my back, a gesture of both protection and possession. And despite everything, despite all the reasons to be afraid, to run, to hide, I found myself leaning into his touch. Just slightly. I had entered the Rossi family's orbit by chance, a simple act of kindness on a rainy night. I had stayed out of necessity to save my business, my dream. But as Alessandro's hand lingered on my back, as his eyes held mine with a promise of something I couldn't yet name, I realized that what happened next would be entirely my choice. And for the first time since that fateful night, I wasn't afraid of the consequences. Tomorrow, then, I said, unlocking my door. Tomorrow, Alessandro confirmed, a new warmth in his voice that sent a shiver down my spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. As he walked back to his car, I watched him go, wondering what I was getting myself into. The sensible part of me knew this could only end badly. The Rossi family, their world, their business. None of it was compatible with the life I had planned for myself. But plans change. People change. And sometimes, the most dangerous choice is the one that leads to something unexpectedly beautiful. I closed the door behind me, already thinking about what I would wear tomorrow night. Whatever happened next, it would be on my terms. I had helped an old man carry his bags on a rainy night, and it had changed the course of my life. Now I was choosing to dine with his son, not out of obligation or fear, but curiosity and perhaps the beginning of something more. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself smiling as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, wondering what new beginnings might await.